On today's Locked On Jayhawks, Kansas beats Duke 75-72 as they show all the player acquisition, all the depth they acquired, worth every penny.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Derek Johnson. You can find me on Twitter at DJohnsonRadio, on Blue Sky at Derek Johnson. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thank you to everydayers tuning in to each and every show. Thank you for making it your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, and you can find us on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. We're going to be breaking down Kansas Duke on today's episode. Recap of the game. Kansas defeats Duke 75-72. Hunter Dickinson was ejected. The veterans showed up for KU. The depth showed up for KU. The defense was there. We're going to talk all about it on this episode of the show. Get to our game awards and what is next for KU. First, this episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. If you would have got Kansas on FanDuel plus 2.5, I think it even closed at like 3.5. You would have been sitting pretty in this one. Kansas wins 75-72, and you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started today. So the Jayhawks end up winning by 3 despite not having Hunter Dickinson for the final 10-ish minutes of the game. This was a game about two things to me. The experienced veterans of Kansas, and mainly the returners, right? KJ Adams, Hunter Dickinson. That it was about Hunter in a different way in this game, and Dajuan Harris, along with the depth that you acquired in the transfer portal, paying off in a real way in this one. Okay, let's think about those in two ways. One, KJ Adams had a phenomenal game for KU. He missed those last couple jump shots, which were kind of like, oh no, what are those shots? But he was also hitting them throughout the game. And, it was something where he had such a big impact on the defensive end of the court. Dajuan Harris had a phenomenal game doing everything for you, pressuring the ball, nearly had a double-double, played 36 minutes and was still looking spry through the end of the game. It was about your veterans in that way, but it was also about the depth you acquired. Last year, Hunter Dickinson gets ejected with 10 minutes to go. Kansas is done. Pack it up, right? Fold it up, right? It's over, especially against the tallest team in the country. But because you have Flory Bidunga, right? It's not all transfer portal. Some of it's freshmen. Because you have Flory Bidunga, you're able to survive that game at the very end. Because you have Rylan Griffen coming off the bench in the second half and hitting some big shots, you're able to survive that game. Because you have Coit coming in and hitting a key 3 for you in the second half, you're able to win that game. This game was about those two things. The key returning starters that KU brought back from last year and filling it, supplanting it with the players you made the additions of in the portal. And it's not perfect right now. They're still figuring each other out. They're still figuring out the roles, right? You're still figuring out everything that you want to be as a team. But there was a little post-game moment where Chris Budden was interviewing Bill Self, and he was kind of smiling. He has the big smile on his face, as you'd imagine, because they just beat Duke by 3 points. And he's got this big smile on his face, and he's like, and we're still figuring stuff out. And I think it was a light bulb moment probably for him, like, man, we got a pretty good team. We've already beaten North Carolina, Duke, and Michigan State, and we're still figuring it out. And we didn't have Hunter Dickinson for the final 10 minutes. Like, in the back of his head, he's going, I have something special here. Let's make the most out of this thing. And I think the crazy thing to me as a part of all of this is that, you'll be able to point to this one and clearly, like, if you're a Duke fan, there's no shame in losing a game like this, as there wouldn't have been any shame if Kansas would have ended up losing this game in a close game, right? Love games like this. It's going to help both teams down the road and everything. Obviously, Duke's going to sit here probably and say, well, listen, we almost won this game, and we only got 13 points from Cooper Flagg, who was shut down in the first half, and Knuppel only had, was 4 of 14. This A game easily. But that's the thing you can do with Kansas in this game. This wasn't even a situation where it's like, okay, well, yeah, Kansas was hot from 3. They were 8 of 17, 47%, but that's not super high volume. And it's not like Duke wasn't hot from 3 either. They were 11 of 26. Tyrese Proctor could not miss. So you can't really point to that. And that's even with there were some good looks for David Coit. The second one that he missed was actually probably a better look than the first one he made. Rylan Griffen had a couple other good looks. You easily could have made another 1 or 2 threes in this game. The 16 turnovers, that's something where you can point to if you're Kansas and Bill Self and be like, okay, well, if, down the road, we'd expect to not have that many turnovers. I think you can also point to down the road that, okay, well, you would hope Hunter Dickinson wouldn't get ejected again, and that like that could be better out of this game too. And on top of it, like in the minutes Hunter Dickinson played, he was really struggling on the offensive end of the court, right? He missed the dunk. He was 4 for 11. He had 3 turnovers. That's the cool part about this, that Kansas won this game, and there's still a lot of things you could point to and be like, oh, but they're going to improve at that, or they're going to be better at that, or like this is going to get, like, right? We still haven't really seen Shaq Moore factor into the rotation. Maybe that's something that just never happens, but like I kind of think it will. It's just tough to go from, oh, you've been on a 5-minute per game limit to now all of a sudden you're going to play in our hardest game of the season against Duke, right? So like there are a lot of tangible reasons that Kansas can get better from a team that already has these 3 gigantic non-conference wins. This was an excellent defensive game for KU. Obviously the offense was good too. You shoot 50% on twos against a Duke team that has all sorts of length. You shoot 47% from 3. You had a ton of assists in this game. You were money at the free throw line, right? Like you won the game doing everything. You don't beat a team like this just doing nothing, but you held them without any field goals over the final 2 minutes and 29 seconds of the game. You made them uncomfortable. You forced 16 turnovers. You had 12 steals. You had 4 blocks in the game. The ball pressure, I was really impressed with KU. The first half specifically, like you were doing a good job keeping them out of the paint. And so, yes, Duke ends up shooting 50% from the floor and 42% from 3. But I look at this game and I look at KU leading 21-15 in points off turnovers. I look at you keeping them to just 5 offensive rebounds. And I sit there and go, yeah, I mean, Duke just made some good threes, and Cooper Flagg had a couple like really good plays where he just made like, you know, that runner, or he had like that one dunk over Flory Bidunga. Like, I don't know. I just felt like Duke had some good offensive moments. I don't think it was that KU was like bad on defense. I thought this was a good defensive game for KU. Other notes from this game before we get into our game awards. AJ Storr ended up starting the game. Now, I don't know if that was specific for the matchup for KU, thinking that, hey, Duke is this ginormous team. AJ Storr is a little bit more built than a guy like Rylan Griffen, gives you a little bit more size out there. I like to think of it as, okay, you had a week off between games. There was a lot of practices. He probably did well in those practices. Now, what's interesting, though, is AJ Storr did not finish the game. Part of that was because Rylan Griffen earned to finish the end of the game because he was playing well in that second half. And AJ Storr was better in the first half than he was in the second half for KU. He wound up with 8 points in the first half, 3 of 6 shooting. In the second half, he had 3 points. He only took 1 shot. So, you know, he was still fine in the second half, but the first half was what he was more known for. But I think that's a good sign for KU that AJ Storr ended up starting, because, again, that probably means he was doing really well in practice and is showing the things that Bill Self wants him to show to earn that spot. And I think AJ Storr is one of the most talented players on this team. So if he's fulfilling what Bill Self wants him to do, that is a very good sign for KU. Another note that I want to make mention of, we talked about this in the takeaways, Kansas needed to find something to increase their like possession maximization, right? You don't have to do great at everything, but what are you going to do good at? Are you going to get more steals? Are you going to get more offensive? Well, you got more steals, you got 12 of them, and you got 10 offensive rebounds, while you were able to hold Duke to 5 offensive rebounds. That is the value of Kansas being able to win more possessions. That, you know, you have to find a way to win on the margins in some of these ways, and Kansas did that in a very real way in this game. And, you know, when you look at it, like Hunter Dickinson had 2 offensive rebounds, Flory had 2 offensive rebounds, like those are the guys you're kind of looking at to be able to do that. And then it was really everybody pitching in on the steals. We've had some other games where it's like just Hunter and Dajuan getting steals, but I think everybody in your starting lineup got at least 1 steal. You had 2 players off the bench get a steal. You had 3 players with multiple steals in this game. Like, just really good stuff from KU overall. So bottom line here, I think you've kind of proven you are a deserving number 1 team. I think there were some questions about, okay, we think Kansas is really good, maybe from the national perspective, right? But are they really number 1? And even I've had some of those questions where it's like, okay, I think Kansas is a really good team, but are they number 4? Are they number 5? Or are they number 1? You know, and I think you look at some of the metric sites and maybe it had them closer to being in that camp than being number 1. And you have some of these other teams winning big games. Like, I don't know, maybe Auburn is the best team in the country. They're winning all these big games, but now you can't really question it until Kansas loses a game, or unless they have like a streak of bad play, right? Like, I mean, if the next couple of weeks you're playing, you know, not as good opponents and you're barely winning every game, like then, yeah, sure, we can question it then. But like, until you lose a game outside of that, you have collected wins over North Carolina, Michigan State, and Duke. you can't really question the resume right now, right? Like they are knocking down gigantic wins. You have proven you were a deserving number one team in the country right now. And while you're still working on things that we just talked about, like that there's reason for things to get even better, you've shown you can beat anyone in the country. And this is why you went out and made sure you had depth in the offseason to overcome a situation like this. Maybe in your wildest dreams, you didn't think Hunter Dickinson was going to get ejected, but was there always a possibility when you're talking about a center that he could have, fouled out of a random game? Absolutely. And now you feel a lot better that if later in the season, let's say we get to an NCAA tournament game, let's say you're in the second round and you get a bad whistle and Hunter Dickinson's in foul trouble all game, or he does end up fouling out of a game. Don't you feel a little bit better being able to go back to this game and lean on it and be like, yeah, it's not ideal, not the best thing in the world, but we trust Flory and we trust the bench and yada, 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 that they're going to be able to have enough to win a game, and to win a game like that. Really impressive stuff for this KU team. Let's continue on with game awards. This is Locked On Jayhawks. This episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL and the Locked On Podcast Network. Continuing on with this episode of Locked On Jayhawks with our game trophies. If you're new to this, we just give out random game trophies. We have some that are the same every week: best moment, worst moment, offensive MVP, defensive MVP, and then we kind of ad-lib from there. Thank you for making this your first listen, by the way. And don't forget, you can check out Locked On College Basketball. Probably going to have some fun things to say about KU on tomorrow's episode, as well as Locked On College Football. All right, our first one is best moment. I mean, it has to be when you force the turnover on that drive by Kneppel, right? When it's kind of a combination of like KJ Adams and Flory Bidunga that are kind of forcing it. At that point, the game wasn't over. You still needed to make the free throws and then make the stop. But that was like the big possession to make the stop, because otherwise, if you give up a bucket there, then it's a different game. Then you're having to score against what's a really good, really long Duke defense without your best offensive player in Hunter Dickinson. So that was obviously a great moment. I guess when the three just banked out, I mean, think about how close the Grayson Allen and then the Kneppel three in some recent games against Duke were to, falling in, but they ended out, and good result at the very end, to say the least. That Zeke Mayo floater that bounced off the rim, like that was a really good moment. Honestly, my favorite just like play, I guess, or like series of plays for best moment might be in the first half. You had the alley-oop that was thrown to Flory Bidunga, throws down a really cool dunk where, again, he just gets, feels like he's like 14 feet in the air. And then very like running down the court very shortly after, blocks a Duke player. For a second, I thought it hit the Duke player out of bounds. It was still off Kansas, but like just seeing that was really cool. And anytime you have somebody who makes like big plays on both ends of the floor like that is really cool. So I think all of those definitely deserving some mention, and there's plenty others. So, if you have another one, hit me up on Twitter at DJohnsonRadio or on Blue Sky, Derek Johnson. Okay. Worst moment of the game. Probably has to be Hunter's ejection, right? I mean, we haven't really touched on it much outside of that it happened. If you want to debate whether it was or wasn't, whether he should or shouldn't, I mean, I'm not really going to have that on this episode. I just want to talk about the Kansas beat Duke, and like that's cool enough for me, and that they had to overcome it happening, because I do think it's important to talk about it. But like, I don't know, man. I can see it from both sides. Like if a Duke player did that to Kansas, I think everybody would be up in arms from the Kansas side of things, right? Which you probably are if you're listening to the show. And would probably be like, oh, that was dirty, like eject that guy. I can also see it from like, well, I mean, did it look like he did it on purpose? I don't know. I don't really know. And Hunter knows in his heart of hearts, and I don't really know. And then again, this might sound crass because it's a player getting ejected, but I don't really care. Like I said, all I really care about is that Kansas won the game and they found a way to do it without Hunter Dickinson. But that was probably the worst moment for KU. Also, Hunter's missed dunk. That was not fun either. This might be the actual worst moment if you're not counting, like, because the ejection has more than, just the game itself. But there was that end of first half run. So Kansas like forces a turnover and then they get a run out and they have it's like a 4-on-2 or something like that. And there's like 15 seconds left in the half. And they're in a situation where they're up 5. And it's like, okay, you can hold for the last shot of the half. Like if you get a wide open layup, sure, take it. And instead of just being like, hey, we're going to either take a wide open layup or hold for the last shot, Rylan Griffen like just pulls up from a random 3. He misses. Then on the defensive end, I don't know if you saw him, he's underneath the paint. He slips and falls. Gets up, slips, and falls. Again, falls to the ground. Then Tyrese Proctor hits a tough 3 over a hand, and it ended up going from you could have been up 7 or 8 points at half, at worst 5, to now you're only up 2. That was a really bad moment, I think, for KU that deserves some talking about at least there. Okay, this award is the exhausted but giving his all to the very end, and that goes to Flory Bidunga. If you want to go back, go watch the possession where KU has the basketball. There's like 3.5 minutes to go. It's right before the under 4 timeout hits. And Flory Bidunga on one end just came up with like a big defensive rebound. He is exhausted. He's not used to playing this many minutes consecutively without Hunter, right? There's a difference between, he's in great shape, but there's always that difference between great shape and game shape. And he's playing more than maybe he's used to. And you can see he's like running around trying to set screens. He's exhausted. So the under 4 timeout comes out at perfect time after that possession. And then he's probably exhausted through the finish, but he keeps battling. He's into the very end on that last defensive possession. I love Flory Bidunga, man. He's so fun to watch. The motor doesn't sound like he's exhausted, but he's still going 100% as much as he can. And really cool stuff there. Okay, this one is the FNBO, I'm going to piss everyone off early, but in the long run be helpful award. Okay, if you were unaware, on Tuesday morning, Kansas announced that FNBO, which is like First National Bank something, is going to be like sponsoring, and they have like a logo on Allen Fieldhouse now. Some people have been, whatever, if it gives more money and allows them to bring in more players, great. Other people, it looks horrible. Why does it have to be green on the court? Can't it be blue? Or just like, why are you disgracing the holy Allen Fieldhouse and everything like that? So the reason I put this here, it's pissing a lot of people off early, but I do think in the long run, if it comes out that like FNBO is paying Kansas, whatever, I don't know, how much do you pay for court name? I have no idea. $10 million, right? Let's say that's what it is. $10 million a year. And that means you're going to land a Darren Peterson type every year, like a top 5 recruit in the country every year because of this. I think a lot of Kansas fans would be like, in the long term, okay, I didn't like it at first, but in the long term, sign me up for that, right? So this award goes to Rylan Griffen. And the reason why is because I mentioned that sequence in the first half. And Rylan Griffen did not have a particularly good first half. He had 0 points in 9 minutes. He was 0 for 2 shooting. He was minus 10. So you look at it, he was minus 10. David Coit was minus 12 in the first half. But then the second half, the long run, Rylan Griffen, 8 points. He scores all of them over the final 6 minutes of the game. He ends up +1 in 8 minutes of play, and he hits those 2 free throws at the end, including a key 3 at the end of the game. So stuck with him to the very end, and it was very helpful in the long run for KU. What about the plus-minus king? Who do you think that would be in this game? Well, it wasn't Hunter Dickinson. He was -2. Dajuan Harris was great. He was only a +4. David Coit was the lowest here at -16. KJ Adams had himself a great game, which we're about to get into a little bit more here coming up, but he was +14. The answer is Zeke Mayo. Zeke Mayo was a +18 and plus-minus. He was 4 for 11. It wasn't his best shooting game. He did hit 2 threes, but he had 4 assists. He had 2 rebounds. He had a steal. He just has been factoring in a lot of different ways, and he can hit some tough shots for you. So the efficiency, hasn't fully been there, especially, 4 of 11. But if you go back to like last year, I'm not even sure. Like, I don't know what player can even get some of the shots off he's getting. Like another player in his shoes from last year's team might go 2 of 11. So to go 4 of 11, like it is a tangible difference from what you were getting last year. So I think that's why he was the plus minus king. And he just adds so much spacing on the court and dynamism in a very real way. Offensive MVP, though, is going to go to Dajuan Harris. He led you in scoring with 14 points. He did so efficiently. He was 6 of 10. He hit a 3. He was 1 for 1 at the free throw line. But also he led you with 9 assists, and he did it compared to just 2 turnovers. He controlled this game. He was able to constantly get paint touches, dribble under the hoop, draw the defense in, know when to kick, know who to pass it to. Like Dajuan Harris controlled this game. And I think really on both ends of the court, because he provided a lot of really good ball pressure at the other end too. And you look at Caleb Foster, like he didn't have like a big game. Zion James hit a couple threes. Those were just like KU, it almost felt like was just kind of leaving him open and being like, we're just going to kind of see what happens. So I thought Dajuan Harris deserved offensive MVP in this one. What about defensive MVP? Like I said, I think honorable mention you could give Dajuan Harris. He had those 3 steals. He was great at applying ball pressure. I think I would also honorable mention Flory Bidunga. He helped in at the end there. He had a block and a steal. He had 6 defensive rebounds. I thought he was really good for you having to fill in for Hunter Dickinson. Honestly, honorable mention for Hunter Dickinson here, because this was not a good Hunter Dickinson offensive game. He had 11 points. He was 4 for 11 from the floor. He was missing bunnies at the rim. He missed the dunk. Like, I feel like Hunter's missed like 3 or 4 dunks already this season. It was not a good Hunter Dickinson offensive game. And obviously it's harder against Duke because they have another 7'2" center and more size that is coming at you to double, that it's going to be a little bit more difficult. But he was missing shots that we normally see him miss. I thought this was one of the better, until he got ejected, I thought this was one of the better defensive games I've ever seen Hunter Dickinson play at KU. He had 2 steals. I thought he was doing, I thought a big reason why Cooper Flagg, had basically nothing going on for him until Hunter went out was that not only that KJ was defending him, but also that the help defense of having Hunter and his size and strength against Cooper Flagg, who is a little bit of a thinner guy, I think helped deter some of that stuff. And so I thought Hunter actually had a good defensive game. But our defensive MVP is KJ Adams. I mean, KJ had the matchup of Cooper Flagg. And again, Cooper Flagg goes 5 of 9. He has 13 points, but he had 4 turnovers. He was basically a non-factor until the really end of the game. And I think there's something to the idea of, like, Cooper Flagg's this ultimate athlete. He's so good with the ball in his hand for a guy that size, and he's got incredible length and everything. He's not, like I said, the strongest, thickest guy in the world. Like, by the time he gets to the NBA in year 3, year 4, like, sure, that stuff will be figured out, I'm sure, for him. But right now, KJ Adams, I think certainly KJ's strength, his stoutness, so to speak, bothered Cooper Flagg early. And I think it took a while for Cooper Flagg to adjust to that to later in the game. And then it also didn't help for him that Hunter Dickinson was giving you extra strength and size when he was in as well. And so I think it took him some time to adjust to that. And if it hadn't taken him as much time to adjust to that, then maybe Duke doesn't, get behind early in the game. And then maybe it's a different game till the very end. Also, KJ hit some of those, tough jumpers and everything, but 3 blocks and 3 steals for KJ Adams. It just felt like he was playing like, I'm just going to take the ball away from you, in any way I can. He was unbelievable on the defensive end of the court, and good for KJ to perform that way. All right, what's next for KU basketball? We talk about it next. This is Locked on Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. And on Thursday's episode, we're going to have a KU Furman preview, so that'll be early in the week to get you ready for Saturday's game. Friday, we'll have our KU Baylor preview, and then over the weekend, we will recap all the action that we're going to see unfold for you. So what is next for everything? Well, for KU men's basketball, Saturday, they're going to be taking on Furman, and that will be in Allen Fieldhouse. It's going to be I believe a 5 o'clock tip-off for that one with Furman. They waited to announce the game time because I think they're waiting to see in football. Yeah, it's going to be 5 o'clock in Allen Fieldhouse. And Furman, that's a team that won a tournament game a couple years ago. They're ranked 121st on KenPom right now. They're 6-0. So that is one of those kind of like trap-ish games where they're like a good mid-major team that very easily could make the NCAA tournament. You're riding high off the Duke game. You're coming off Thanksgiving, and all of a sudden it's a 6-point game at the under 8 timeout or the under 4 timeout. Like, that would not be the most shocking thing in the world. So still got to take care of business in that one. But like I said, we'll preview that one on Thursday. And then after that, it's a tough 2-game road trip with some power conference opponents, Creighton and Missouri. Now, neither team is like, Creighton has kind of fallen off in a real way. They just lost big to San Diego State, but they still got some key players. And Ryan Kalkbrenner has been unbelievable to start at the center position. So that's going to be a really fun matchup. Obviously, playing on the road, they're going to be tough, although I'll be interested to see how many KU fans make the travel up, because it's only, like 3-hour drive up to Omaha. And then you have the at Missouri game, which that's, just a different level of kind of hatred coming at you and road environment. So even though neither of those teams is seen as like a top 30 team in the country right now, they're both going to be tough environments against teams that, if you don't play your best, can certainly snipe you. And Furman's going to be an interesting one too. So stick around for all our content previewing or talking about all of those games, in addition to KU football later this week against the Baylor Bears. That'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcasts, including on our YouTube page, where you can like and subscribe. See you next time with LOJ.